All right, welcome to the Bryce Eddy Show. So today my guest is Ammon Blair. He's from the Texas Policy Foundation, Public Policy Foundation, and he's been on the show before. I'm going to have him introduce himself for those of you that haven't heard him, but his expertise is the border, and he's got some thoughts on that. And I am happy to have him on because that crisis is not over yet, and it's something that we need to be dealing with for the coming years. Ammon Blair, how are you, sir?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, glad to have you back on, man. I mean, I've been passionate about this because I did some operations down there on our southern border and got to see firsthand what was happening during the Biden administration with our open border policy. But now we've got a problem in that we have, people in our interior now that are, gangsters and cartel members and human traffickers. And those folks, even with a closed down border to just sort of that open border flow, those guys are still operating, and we still have this problem to deal with. So I wanted to get your insight and some of your thoughts on really what's happening and what we do about it. But first, just give people your credentials, your background for those that didn't watch our first episode together.
Sure. So I served a little over 22 years in the military. I was also a Border Patrol agent in the Rio Grande Valley sector from 2013 until about November of 2023. I couldn't smuggle for the Department of Homeland Security anymore under the Biden administration or facilitate the invasion. So I left and I came to the Texas Public Policy Foundation. But during that time, when I was on the border, I was also working for private intel companies, specifically got Omni Intelligence, where I conducted intel on or analyzed all the threats emanating from the border, whether that's the cartels, the CCP, the Triads, Tren de Aragua, just every single entity that was emanating from the border itself into the interior of the U.S.
Awesome. So let's talk about those risks because, again, what I observed is there are people that were, coming here because they wanted to be here and work here. And, there was sort of an open invitation. There's also the magnetic draw of our welfare state for those folks. And so, those are the people that we saw, right? And then we saw the category of people that I got to witness that were the cartel folks and that were the people who were trafficking and smuggling, and some of that was right open under our noses as they were walking through with everybody else. That has largely been shut down now, or stifled to a very low amount. But the CCP, the cartel, Tren de Agua, all of those. Let's talk about those, and maybe you want to just march through in turn as to what's happening and what that legitimate threat is right now.
Sure. Before that, so the Mexican cartels around the early 1990s, they started becoming an insurgency in Mexico. And so when that happened, that was when the PRI, they were under one-party rule. The PRI started losing their governance at the subnational level, and that's when the cartels started becoming an insurgency, and then they became the super cartels later on that we see today. But during that same time period, that is when also, if you realize the cocaine trade shifted from the Caribbean or from the Gulf through Mexico. And that's when Colombia, the cartels in the Colombia, whether that's Medellin or the Cali cartel, as well as the FARC, started working their way through Mexico. When that happened, that's when they started making a logistical supply chain to every one of our communities inside the United States. And so really the cartels have really built a Silk Road into every one of our communities and neighborhoods. So now today we're seeing that in order for any of our adversaries, whether that's the CCP, whether that is any of the cartels from Venezuela, like Tren de Aragua or the Cartel of the Suns or Hezbollah, Hamas, you name it, no matter what adversary, they now must create a relationship with the Mexican cartels because they had their own Belt and Road Initiative, just like China does, into every one of our communities. So really, that's what we started seeing. So all the migration, the mass migration that we saw were along those pipelines into every one of our communities. And so when you import thousands of foreign nationals, that we're seeing this worldwide, whether that's the UK, France, or anywhere else, when you import so many foreign nationals along these pipelines, where they end up inside the United States, they typically don't assimilate. They stay in their diasporas. And when they do that, they overload local law enforcement. And that is where the cartels also take governance and control on U.S. sovereign soil over these populations. You see that in Aurora, Colorado with Tren de Aragua. You see that in the urban areas of like Houston or other areas. You're seeing that in Chicago. You're seeing it in other areas. And that's why you have these local gang members putting hits on Border Patrol agents, like the chief of the Border Patrol there in Chicago. They put out a $10,000 reward for a hit on him. And that is because the cartels literally control territory on U.S. soil throughout these populations.
Yeah, and what I find interesting is the cartels are a parallel government in Mexico. They are very much in control of the communities down there, very much in control or in partnership with the governing authorities, both local and their state government authorities. I mean, all over the place. You see that. You also see that they are involved deeply in our communities all over the United States. People want to consider them, maybe in the southern border states or things like that. Oh, okay, we recognize that that's the case. All right, whatever. No, they are all over the U.S. And not to mention that is there's a lot of evidence that suggests that they operate all over the world at this point. I mean, these are multi-billion-dollar organizations that have military and or a corporate structure in place, and know how to circumvent our laws or play within them to a certain extent, and cause their organizations to thrive. And people don't understand the extent of which they run some of our cities. It's wild to witness. So Trump recognizes this, I think, and there's been some good news lately with the declaration of them as actual terrorist organizations. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so that designation, like you said, they control vast swaths of not only Mexico but the U.S. In 2019, there was a redacted map, or a map that was leaked from the Mexican military, that showed that the cartels either controlled or contested over 80% of the entire population of Mexico, and that was 6 years ago. They are the fifth largest employer in Mexico, and so you got to think, if that's how they operate in Mexico. And they're also, because of their prevalence, Mexico is now the fourth most dangerous place in the world. And that is not even by our data or analysis. That's actually from global organizations. And because of that criminality, they are the third most criminally organized country in the world as it stands now. And so when you look at that, you look at, okay, if that's how they're operating there, they are in a complete non-international armed conflict in Mexico. They are operating both conventional and unconventional warfare means, drone warfare, IEDs. Everything that you see in the Middle East is happening south of us. In fact, even more so in terms of gore, like the beheadings, the mass beheadings, the indoctrination, of the cannibalism by CGNG, by forcing their sicarios to eat the flesh of their enemies. So we're seeing all that here. But inside the United States, we're really seeing them operate in what the military calls like a gray zone conflict, everything below the threshold of war. So that way they can operate under the guise that they're operating under the guise of immigration. And they do that so we don't utilize all of our military assets. We don't designate them as foreign terrorist organizations. We don't use our intelligence communities to go after them. We continue that same old outdated process of litigation, creating files on them, you name it. And we can see this. There was a case last year, 41 individuals that were linked to CGNG. It took DOJ and HSI 62 months, so 5 years, to make that case. And they only got 23 out of the 41 indicted, and a lot of them bailed out. So we see that whole entire process is just completely outdated. And so the FTO designation by the Trump administration switches it where we can now use Title 10 authority, meaning that we can now use military action against the cartels. And that we've seen that in the Caribbean, where he's wiping out like Tren de Aragua and the cartels coming from Venezuela. You're also seeing that where we're operating counterintelligence and surveillance ISR assets inside Mexico or at our border. You're starting to see a little more military action in terms of that. But really what needs to happen is on the softer side of the military, on the asymmetric side, we need to start seeing the counterterrorism or the internal defense mechanisms that you would see overseas in contingency operations internally. And unfortunately, that still is not happening. And I don't know if that's because of a lack of willpower amongst the rest of the people that he's selected within the administration or not.
Yeah, I don't know, and that's a good question to ask and a good thing to investigate. I'd be curious to know the answer there. I'm always amazed. I know you interfaced with some of the Biden administration officials, on the even on a local level. Talking with some of the Democrats, when you lay some of this stuff out with them, in the past, and you are pointing at what's happening, are they? Is it simply just incompetence or bad policy ideas? Do they not believe you? I'm always fascinated how I hate to call them the other side, but let's call them the other side. I'm always amazed or perplexed at how do they think about this stuff? Why do they dismiss it?
Yeah, good question. There's a few things. So really, actually, when she was secretary, so Hillary Clinton came out and said that the cartels were insurgents, and that they looked the exact same as the ones that we were dealing with in the Middle East. And then, because of trade and everything and other agreements, she was forced to redact that statement. So there are those in the Democrat Party that know the exact threats that are actually happening. But if they were to recognize those threats, if they were to recognize that the cartels operationally control our border, if they were to recognize the atrocities that they commit, then they would have to do something about it. They would have to close between the ports of entry. They would have to actually secure the border, obtain operational control based off of the 2006 Secure Fence Act, which Democrats signed into law. And so it would thwart their entire open borders agenda to then which would then eradicate our sovereignty as a nation and sovereignty as a state. So really, a lot of the reasons, like whenever we discuss the problems about the cartels issues and everything else like that, they'll try to downplay it. They'll either say, just like what they do with Antifa, they're really not an organization. They're just a bunch of groups of gangs together. That this is kind of like a ways or means for the conservative right to go after the war on drugs. So that's actually in academic papers and research right now going on in academia, that cartels don't exist. The other one is that
until they cut your head off, but whatever.
Until they cut your head off, exactly. And then the other one is that they're just criminals because they don't have the same ideologies as ISIS or Al Qaeda.
Yeah, no. I witnessed forward operating bases, guys, walking with observable M240s and all of the best military tech and gear that money can buy. I mean, outfitted in better gear than even some of our highest level operators. I mean, it was really amazing to witness, and so for them to do that is, again, it's absurd, and I think it is because they do want, in my opinion, and I think they've written on this and they've said it enough, but they they want to import permanent voting block for them, and I think leaving the borders open and unprotected allowed them to do that to a great extent, and it was like, okay, damn the consequences, we'll deal with those later.
Yeah, 100%. In fact, I was just in Canada this week. A lot of the provinces in Canada requested us to go up there and discuss the threat of the cartels and also the Chinese triad because they're getting destroyed.
Yep.
And they're getting destroyed by fentanyl. They're getting the cartels are shifting a lot of their operations into Canada. And the same thing, if the federal government in Canada recognized the threats of the CCP, the triad, and also the cartels in their area, as well as the border and how they're utilizing the First Nations up there, like the Mohawk Nation. If they recognize that, then they would have to completely stop their mass importation of foreign nationals into their country. And that goes 100% against their agenda. And so they're trying to figure out as well. A lot of the provinces like Alberta and others are trying to figure out a way to work with the Trump administration to actually help identify the threat and understand it. So that way regular Canadians can actually understand this threat as well. And that's how I address everything. Whenever when I was speaking with the Canadian Parliament, when I was speaking with officials, when we speak with Democrats, at first it's just to try to get them to understand the very nature of the threat. So that way we can actually come together on, hey, this is the actual situation, instead of fighting about the situation, so we can move on. And maybe we can have disagreements on what the actual solutions are to that situation. But if we can't even agree on what the situation is in the very first, then nothing's ever going to happen.
Yeah, if you can't define the problem and agree on what it is, then forget the solutions. You'll never ever get there. And that's what I always find mind-boggling, because I think the average person, once you educate them on this, the average, let's say, normal Democrat voter, forget the far left or the people that are just doing their best to accumulate power for themselves as politicians, forget those folks. But if you look at the average Democrat voter and you lay some of the evidence out for this, they do recognize it's a problem, but we may not agree on the solution, or they might diminish it and all that until you show them some of the more direct effects that we're seeing, or some of the more direct evidence. I'm curious as to one thing, which is when they blasted that boat in the Caribbean, the cry out there was, oh, what about their due process? I'm so mystified as to how the Democrat Party and its shills look at enemy combatants of that sort, or foreign terrorist organizations, or illegal immigrants, and expect that our Constitution applies to them. And that always blows my mind. What say you on that?
Yeah, 100%. And really, I think that's why the Supreme Court is, we're going to have that case brought up about birthright citizenship. And really, at the crux of all of this is the definition of what constitutes as a citizen. What are the legal rights and responsibilities of that citizen versus a legal resident or an illegal alien? And right now, because of so many loopholes that have been created in historical jurisprudence, that is such a gray area, even though it never should be. You're exactly right. An illegal alien should not have the exact same rights as a citizen of this country, nor should it have the same responsibilities. Look, we can't just have rights without responsibilities.
That's right.
And so, yeah, 100%. And so when we're talking about due process, really at the end of the day, they're looking at eradicating the whole idea. They already eradicated under the Biden administration immigration. They created that whole entire parallel system to bring in millions of foreign nationals. Now their whole idea is now to eradicate the whole idea of naturalization and the idea and concept of citizenry. And instead of becoming a global subjects as opposed to a citizens of a constitutional republic. A great book on this is by Victor Davis Hanson called The Dying Citizen. He lays it out exactly their entire plan of eradicating this. And so whenever they talk about due process for illegal aliens, Abrego, that case of the MS-13 guy is exactly this, what's happening now. Right now, a lot of the judges are adjudicating based off of your ideology or based off of your identity, not really the rule of law. And the whole idea and concept, once again, is to go back to eradicating what is a citizen and just giving it and making everyone a subject under that communistic or oligarchical rule.
Yeah, no, that is absolutely true. I mean, all of this stuff has been an attack for years. I mean, almost everything that the left is doing has been an attack on our sovereignty. Both at the national level on down to community and family and all of that. That's what it is about. It's an ideological attack. It's a
Mhm.
redefinition of what it means to be an American or a citizen of any country. Oh, remember, we're all global citizens,
Mhm.
while they are looking for a feudalism 2.0 to make us all their slaves.
Correct.
And you know, and that's what we're seeing in this. And it's, I mean, frankly, and I think you agree with me, it's disgusting, and it diminishes us, and you know, destroys our communities. I mean, you would never have thought that you would have the Muslim call to prayer in Dearborn, Michigan, or the fact that you cannot pass out Christian materials in Dearborn, Michigan. You cannot pass out Christian tracts. They will arrest you for that in Dearborn, Michigan, and people can look that up if they don't believe me. But we have that going on here in the United States now, and it's egregious. It's horrible. I think we need to push back against all of it.
Yeah, and I think there's a Governor DeSantis has actually really pushed back because he realized that the sovereignty of this nation is going to start at the sovereignty of his state. And so when he declared that they were going to establish a complete immigration division within the state of Florida, and then create a position that oversees and holds accountable to all action items under the state in terms of immigration enforcement. When he did that, and that was passed in their legislature, that entire plan that he has, which is available for anyone to see, they can see the entire immigration enforcement operations manual. They publicized it. Um, he has shone a light onto every single one of our states on how to take actions, not just on immigration enforcement as well, the rule of law, the defense of citizenship, what it means, and also public safety. Because right before he did that, he also created a special missions unit with his state guard that has direct command over him. That special missions unit, what he did is he invited all the Navy SEALs, Green Berets, Rangers, Marine Recon, and established a special missions unit under the state guard, which he commanded controls just through him. That line of command is through him, that has no federal oversight. Then he also had them sign memorandums of understanding with every sheriff in the state of Florida. That way, the Florida sheriffs and the law enforcement now have trained special operators as a ways and means to assist in not only mass deportations but public safety against the cartels and TCOs in the state, and also conduct intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance based off of what they've done in the past in their military careers. So
I love it.
Florida itself is such a great model in terms of internal defense, sovereignty, and also defending immigration and citizenship.
That's great. That's really smart. I mean, look, DeSantis is a policy wonk. He understands the things that need to be put in place to do that. He also is not afraid to wield state power.
Yeah.
You know, we were a collection of states before we had a, federal government of this size. And so I'm glad that both Trump is using, appropriate federal powers,
Mhm.
and that guys like DeSantis are bravely wielding state powers. What do you say to all the propagandists or the people listening that think that we're zip tying kids in Colorado and arresting children and pregnant mothers that just want to live here in the U.S.? I mean, they're lying to us about this stuff, but what can you share about what's actually going on with our deportation efforts around the U.S.?
Yeah, so great question. So the targeting process, of course, we're going after criminal illegal aliens is the priority, but also any illegal alien. You're here illegally. You've already gone through that quote unquote due process. You've seen an immigration judge, and now it's time to go. And so we're just enacting the rule of law, and that's going to include anyone illegally present. We are defending citizenship, and so that's going to include families and children. So, but what people are saying is that we're also deporting citizen kids or those anchor babies that they may be citizens themselves and their parents are here illegally. But in defense of that, ICE put out a good memorandum. I think it was July 2nd that discussed this issue, in which they said, well, we don't want to inundate the state and put them through the state system, which is already broken in terms of the foster care system. They need to remain with their parents. And so the best concept for these children is to remain with them, where they go back to their home of country, their country of origin. Or the other idea is to vet U.S. citizens that may be their next of kin. So your aunts or uncles that are citizens inside the United States, and not leave them with someone that they cannot vet. And that was a whole issue under the Biden administration. Not only could we not vet the individuals that were coming in, but we couldn't also vet their sponsors. And so we were handing off these children, hundreds and thousands of children, to traffickers and people that we had no idea who they were. And so the most humane thing that we can do is to keep these kids with their parents. And the other most humane thing we can do is to make sure that they are not subjugated to labor trafficking, like for Tyson meatpacking plants, or human trafficked. And the only way we can do that is by gathering them all up together in an orderly fashion, and then getting them to the proper place, whether that is with their parents or whatnot. So that's what I would say to those: is this is the most humane thing that we can actually do for these children.
Well, the other part of this is, we were screaming and alerting people to this problem for years. This is a problem that took years to get to, and then now it's very messy. Now you're complaining about the solution being messy when there is very little alternative. You guys helped to create this. Where were you guys when we were saying we cannot have this amount of mass illegal immigration? We just can't do it. So, where were they then? That's always something that bothers me. And of course, we don't want to break up families, and the families can go back with their children to where they came from. And those people did make a decision also to engage in illegal immigration themselves personally. And look, my heart goes out. I have a belief that we can do programs and things that make it very, very much easier for the flow of, let's say, temporary seasonal workers and, things like that. I do not begrudge people that want to come here for a better life. Let's make the people who want to come here and contribute to our society, let's make that an easy and legal process. Let's make it an easy and legal process for companies that need laborers. I mean, there are ways that we can do these things legally if we all want to come together. There's a possibility for a compromise. But what we've done is we've allowed for the criminal aspects of this thing to blow up in our faces, and now people don't like the results and don't like the efforts that it takes to clean it up.
Yeah, I mean, really, communists thrive in chaos because then they can create more control. And that's what they did. They created this by design. This was a designed and engineered humanitarian crisis. Really, weaponized mass migration is just that across the world. And that is why even the EU and NATO have designated weaponized mass migration as a form of hybrid warfare. Because once it destabilizes environments, it creates hypocrisy costs within the environment, because now they're part of your society. And it creates emotional drawdowns. It creates such a big problem, all by design. All this chaos is all by design, so that they can end up saying, we created the problem, but we also have the solution. It's like the guy that goes to war and sells bandages, but he also sells the bullets. And really, that's what they've done. Yeah,
they're selling the poison and the cure. I mean, it's it's an amazing situation we're in. I'm glad guys like you are on it and analyzing it and speaking the truth. So thank you for your work there. How do we follow you, sir?
Yeah, so I actually don't have social media myself. So if you just go to our website, texaspolicy.com, you can see everything that we're doing. You can follow all the op-eds that we write, whether that's through the Blaze, the Daily Wire, or Fox. You can see all of our research that we have. We have extensive research and a lot of outreach. Just like I said, I was just in Canada working with their public officials on border security, encountering the cartel there. We were also just in Budapest, Hungary, doing the same thing on weaponized mass migration.
Yeah, excellent. Well, you're probably a happier man staying off social media. It's definitely a healthier way to be. Well, thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate you. And to God be the glory, and we are out. Hey, thank you for watching or listening to this show. If you are someone who listens to us on the podcast apps, please go to our Rumble channel. Even if you're not going to watch us there, we'd appreciate you hitting subscribe. We want to boost those numbers up and make sure that that channel continues to grow. But again, thank you so much for listening to us.